Hello again, I'm Grammar Man. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. And if you're a seasoned veteran, then welcome back. Let's get into it. We've got a lot to cover today. Relative clauses 101. So what are relative clauses? Relative clauses are a clause. For all intent and purposes, a clause is just a group of words, not a complete sentence, just part of a sentence. And a relative clause is a clause that begins with who, whose, whom, which, that, where, when, or why. Relative clauses can be defined as a group of words that give us more information about a person or thing. So a relative clause functions as an adjective. They give us more information about a person or thing, about a noun. This information can tell us which person or thing we are talking about. For example, the girl who is standing over there is an Olympic swimmer. Who is standing over there is the relative clause. It starts with who and it gives us more information about a person. In this sentence, this information is essential to knowing which person we are talking about. It defines which person we are talking about. For this reason, this is called a defining relative clause. Which girl are you talking about? The girl who is standing over there. Defining relative clause defines the noun that comes before it. If this was left out of the sentence, you would be left wondering, what girl? Which one? A couple more examples of defining relative clauses. The cake that Claudia made was delicious. Here, that Claudia made is the defining relative clause. It defines which cake I am talking about. Another example, I buy my eggs from the farmer whose chickens are not in cages. Okay, whose chickens are not in cages. Defining which farmer. Not just any farmer, but the one whose chickens are not kept in cages. And one more, this is the village where my wife grew up. Where my wife grew up is the defining relative clause telling us which village I am referring to. This is the village where my wife grew up. Now, there are two types of relative clauses. You've learnt one, and the other type is called a non-defining relative clause. And what this does is it begins with exactly the same words here. So who, whose, whom, which, that, where, when, or why. But the difference is it gives us additional information. It is not necessary to know. It does not define the person or thing. For example, George Clooney, who is an American actor, is in the movie Ocean's 11. Here, who is an American actor is a non-defining relative clause. It is extra information, and we separate this extra information from the rest of the sentence with commas. If we covered it up and just said, George Clooney is in the movie Ocean's 11, the sentence still makes perfect sense. You are not left wondering what George Clooney. You can compare this to the defining relative clause example that I gave a moment ago. The girl who is standing there is an Olympic swimmer. If you covered up the clause, you would be left wondering, what girl? Another example. I live in Switzerland, which has amazing mountains. So another point on all relative clauses, defining or non-defining, they can go at the end of a sentence or in the middle of a sentence. That's fine. So the non-defining relative clause is which has amazing mountains. It starts with which and provides more information about a thing, specifically Switzerland. And this is another example of a non-defining relative clause, isn't it? Because it's extra information. I live in Switzerland. This makes sense on its own. Which has amazing mountains is extra information. And one more example of a non-defining relative clause. Madrid, where my friend is from, is the capital of Spain. Once again, the fact that my friend is from Madrid is extra information. It is not essential to knowing which Madrid I am talking about. If you covered it up, the sentence still makes perfect sense. Okay, so a quick summary, and then I'll go a little deeper. Relative clauses are just a group of words that give us more information about a person or thing. They start with who, whose, whom, which, that, where, when, or why, and there are two types: defining, which tell us which person or thing we are talking about, and non-defining, which gives us additional information. A couple more things to know. We use who, whom, whose, and that to refer to people. The woman that lives next door is a nurse, or the woman who lives next door is a nurse. Both of these are fine to use here. 2 points to be aware of though. You cannot use that in non-defining relative clauses. Only in defining relative clauses. So you couldn't say George Clooney, that is an American actor, is in Ocean's 11. And also be aware, you cannot use which to refer to people. So you can't say the woman which lives next door is a nurse. This is a common error. You cannot use which for people. We can use which and that to refer to things. So we could say, I don't like scary movies that make you jump. Or, I don't like scary movies which make you jump. Both of these are defining relative clauses that refer to things. But remember, importantly, that cannot be used in non-defining relative clauses. So we must use which to refer to things in a sentence like this. I live in Switzerland, which has beautiful mountains. This is non-defining, so we can't use that. That is not used in non-defining clauses ever. The remaining pronouns include where, which is used to refer to a place. This is a restaurant where we often eat. And we can also use that if the clause is defining. This is a restaurant that we often eat in. We use when to refer to time. I'm not sure when the party starts. And why to refer to reasons. There is no reason why you shouldn't now understand the basics of relative clauses. And that brings us to the end of today's grammar lesson. We've covered a lot of ground. Now what you need to do is you need to practice using these. What you should do is write some sentences in the comments section using relative clauses. And I'll provide some feedback on some of these. And those of you watching that are a little more experienced can also help out some of the less experienced people. I'll make some more lessons on relative clauses soon. I think the next one I'll go into is when we use whom and whose, as this question often comes up. To be notified whenever I make a new lesson, make sure you subscribe and click the bell, and I'll see you soon for another English lesson. Take care. Cheers.